Hi guys, welcome back to Christy's Book Corner. I'm your host, Christy Mason. Let's just dive right in, because we got a lot of chapters to do. So, starting with chapter 13 of Inkheart. Chapter 13. I don't like the thing. Okay. Capricorn's Village. The sun was already high in the clouds. Cloudless sky when they set off. Soon the air was so hot and muggy in Eleanor's car that Maggie's t-shirt was sticking to her skin with sweat. Eleanor opened her window and passed a bottle of water around. She herself was wearing a knitted jacket buttoned up to her chin, and when Maggie wasn't thinking of Mo or Capricorn, she wondered whether Eleanor might melt away inside it. Dustfinger sat in the back seat, so silent you could almost have forgotten he was there. He had put Gwen on his lap. The Martin slept while Dustfinger's hands restlessly stroked his fur, passes over it again and again. Now and then Maggie turned to look at him. He was usually gazed out of the window, indifferently, as if he were looking straight through the mountains and trees, houses, rocks, slopes, passing by outside. His expression seemed perfectly empty, as if he were thinking of something far away, and once, when Maggie glanced around, there was such sadness on his scarred face that she quickly turned to look out of the windshield ahead of her. She would have liked to have an animal on her own lap during this long journey. Perhaps it would have driven away the dark thoughts that insisted on coming into her mind. Outside the world was a place of gently unfolded mountains, rising higher and higher. Sometimes it seemed as if they would crush the roads between their gray and rocky sides. But worse than the mountains were the tunnels. Pictures seemed to lurk in them that not even Gwen's warm body could have helped kept at bay. They seemed to be hiding there in the darkness, waiting for Maggie's pictures of Mo in some grim, cold place, and of Capricorn. Maggie knew it must be Capricorn, although his face wasn't different every time. She tried reading for a while, but soon noticed that she wasn't taking in a word of what she read. So she gave up and stared out the window like Dustfinger. Eleanor chose minor roads without much traffic on them. Otherwise, the driving gets so boring, she said. It made no difference to Maggie. She just wanted to arrive. She looked impatiently at the mountains and the houses where only other people lived. Sometimes through the window of the car coming the other way, she caught a glimpse of a stranger's face. Then it was gone, like a book opened then closed at once. When they were driving through one village, she saw a man by the roadside sticking a band-aid on the grazed knee of a tearful little girl. He was stroking her hair comfortably, and Maggie couldn't help remembering how often Mo had done that for her. How he sometimes chased all around the house, cursing when he couldn't find a band-aid in time. The memory brought tears to her eyes. Heavens above, it's quieter in here than in a pharaoh's burial chamber, said Eleanor at the spot. Couldn't one of you at least just say something now and then? Oh, what a lovely landscape, for instance, or that's a very fine castle. If you keep as deathly quiet as this, I'll be falling asleep at the wheel any minute now. She still hadn't undone a single button of her knitted jacket. I don't see any castle, muttered Maggie. Muttered Maggie. But it wasn't long before Eleanor spotted one. 16th century, she announced, as the ruined walls appeared on the mountain's side. Tragic story, forbidden love, pursuit, death, grief, and pain. And as they passed between the strong and silent rock walls, Eleanor told the tale of a battle that had raged in this very place over 600 years ago. To this day, if you dig among the stones, you'll still find bones and dented helmets. She seemed to know a story along about every church tower. Some were so unlikely that Maggie wrinkled her brow in disbelief, and Eleanor, without taking her eyes off the road, always responded, "No, really, that's just what happened." She seemed to be particularly fond of bloodthirsty stories, tales of the beheading of unhappy lovers, or princes walled up alive. "Yes, everything looks very peaceful now," she remarked when Maggie turned a little pale at one of these stories. "But I can tell you, there's always a sad story somewhere. Ah, well, times were more exciting a few hundred years ago." Exciting. Maggie didn't know what was so exciting about times when, if Eleanor was to be believed, your only choice was between dying of the plague or getting slaughtered by invaded soldiers. But Eleanor's cheeks glowed pink with excitement at the sight of some burnt-out old castle, and whenever she told tales of the warrior princes and greedy bishops who had once spread terror and death abroad in the very mountains through which they were now driving on modern paved roads, a romantic gleam lit her usual chilly, pebbled eyes. "My dear Eleanor, you were obviously born into the wrong story," said Dustfinger at last. They were the first words he had spoken since they set out. "The wrong story? The wrong period, you mean?" "Yes, I've often thought so myself." "Call it what you like," said Dustfinger. "Anyway, you should get along with Capricorn. With Capricorn. He likes the same kinds of stories as you." "Is that supposed to be an insult?" asked Eleanor, offended. The comparison seemed to trouble her, for after that she kept quiet for almost an hour, which left Maggie with nothing to distract her from her miserable thoughts and the frightening pictures they conjured up for her in every tunnel. Twilight was beginning to fall when the mountains drew back from the road, and the sea suddenly appeared beyond green hills, a sea as wide as another sky. The sinking sun made it glisten like the skin of a beautiful snake. It was a long time since Maggie had seen the sea, and then it had been a cold sea, slate gray and pale from the wind. This sea looked different, very different. It warmed Maggie's heart just to see it, but all too often it disappeared beyond the tall, ugly buildings covering the narrow strip of land that lay between the water and the encroaching hills. Sometimes the hills reached all the way up down to the sea, and in the light of the setting sun, they looked like giant waves that had rolled up onto the land. As they followed the winding castle road, Eleanor began telling stories again. Tales of the Romans who, she said, had built the road they were on, and how they feared the savage inhabitants of this narrow strip of land. Maggie was only half listening. Palm trees grew beside the road, their fronds dusty and sharp-edged. Giant agaves flowered among the palms, looking like spiders, squatting there with their long, spiny leaves. The light behind them turned pink and lemon yellow as the sun sank further down toward the sea, and dark blue trickled down from the sky like ink flowing into the water. It was so beautiful at sight that it almost hurt to look at it. Maggie had thought the place where Capricorn lived would be quite different. Beautiful and fear make uneasy companions. They drove through a small town, past houses as bright as if a child had painted them. They were colored washed orange and pink, red and yellow. A great many were yellow, pale yellow, brownish yellow, sandy yellow, dirty yellow, and they had green shutters and red-brown roofs. Even the gathering twilight couldn't drain them of their brightness. "It doesn't seem so very dangerous here," remarked Maggie, as they drove past another pink house. "That's because you keep looking to your left, and Dustfinger behind her," said Dustfinger behind her. "But there's always a light side and a dark side. Look to your right for a change." Maggie did as he said. At first she saw nothing but the bright-colored houses there too. They crawled close to the roadside, leaning against each other, as if they were arm in arm. But then the houses were suddenly left behind, and steep hills, with the night already settling among their fold line the road instead. Dustfinger was right. It looked sinister over there, and the few houses left seemed to be drowning in the gathering dusk. It quickly grew darker, for nightfall has fast in the south, and Maggie was glad that Eleanor was driving along the well-lit coastal road. But all too soon, Dustfinger told her to turn off along a minor road leading away from the coast, away from the sea and the bright-colored houses, and into the dark. The road wound farther and farther and into the hills, going up and down as the slopes by the roadside grew steeper and steeper. The light of the headlights fell on brambles of vines run wild, and on olive trees crouching like bent old men beside the road. Only twice did they meet another vehicle coming toward them. Now and then the lights of the village emerged from the darkness, but the road along which Dustfinger guided Eleanor led away from the lights and deeper in the night. Several times the beam of the headlights fell on ruined houses, but Eleanor didn't know stories about any of them. No princess had lived in those wretched hovels, no red-robed bishops, only farmers and laborers, whose stories no one had written down. And now they were lost, buried under wild themes and fast-growing spurge. "Are you still going the right way?" asked Eleanor in a mute voice, as if the world around her were too quiet for anyone to speak out loud. "Where on earth do we find a village in this God-forsaken wilderness? We've probably taken at least 2 wrong turns already." But Dustfinger only shook his head. "We're going the right way," he replied. "Once we're over that hill, you'll be able to see the houses." "I certainly hope so," murmured Eleanor. "I can hardly make out the road. Heavens above, I had no idea anywhere in the world was still so dark. Couldn't you have told me what a long way it was? Then I'd have filled up the tank again. I'd even know if we have enough to make it back to the coast." "So whose car is this?" Dustfinger snapped back. "Mine. I told you I don't know the first thing about cars. Now keep your eyes on the road. We'll be coming to the bridge any moment." "Bridge?" Eleanor drove around the next bend and suddenly stamped on the brake. Right across the road, lit by 2 flooding lights, was a metal barrier. It looked rusty, as it had stood there for years. "There," said Eleanor, clapping her hands on the steering wheel. "We have gone the wrong way. I told you so." "No, we haven't." Dustfinger took one off his shoulder and got out of the car. He looked around, listening intently as he approached the barrier, then dragged it over to the side of the road. Eleanor's look of disbelief almost made Maggie laugh out loud. "Has the man gone right out of his mind?" she whispered. "He doesn't think I'm going to drive down a closed road in this darkness, does he?" All the same, she started the engine when Dustfinger impatiently waved her on. As soon as she was past him, he pulled the barrier back across the road. "No need to look at me like that," he said, climbing back into the car. "The barrier was always there. Capricorn had it put on to keep unwanted visitors away. Not that people often venture up here. Capricorn spread stories around the village that keep most of them at a distance. But what sort of stories? Maggie interrupted him, although she didn't think she really wanted to know. Blood-curdling stories, said Dustfinger. Like most folk, the locals around here are superstitious. The most common tale is that the devil himself lives on the far side of that hill. Maggie was angry with herself for being scared, but now she just couldn't take her eyes off the dark hilltop. Most says human beings invented the devil, she said. Well, maybe, Dustfinger's mysterious smile was covering almost around his mouth again. But you wanted to know about the stories? They say no bullet can kill the man who lived in that village. They can walk through walls, that they kidnap 3 boys every month when the moon is new, and Capricorn teaches them to commit theft, arson, and murder. Good heavens, who thought all that up? Like the folk of these parts, or this man Capricorn himself? Eleanor was leaning right over the steering wheel. The road was full of potholes, and she had to drive very slowly so as not to get stuck. Both, Dustfinger leaned back and let Gwen nibble his fingers. Capricorn rewarded people who think up new stories. The one man who never joins in that game is Basta. He's so superstitious himself, he even goes out of his way to avoid black cats. Basta. Maggie remembered that name. But before she could ask any more questions, Dustfinger was speaking again. He seemed to enjoy telling these tales. Oh yes, I almost forgot. Of course everyone living in the village of the damned has the evil eye, even the women. The evil eye? Maggie looked at him. That's right. One glance and you'll fall mortally ill. 3 days after that, at the least, you're dead as a doornail. Who'd believe a thing like that? Murmured Maggie, turning to look ahead of her again. Idiots would. Eleanor stamped out the brakes again. The car skid over gravel on the road. The bridge Dustfinger had mentioned lay ahead, its gray stone pale in the headlights. Go on, said Dustfinger impatiently. It'll hold through you. You might not think so. It looks as if the ancient Romans built it, muttered Eleanor. But for donkeys, not cars. All the same, Eleanor drove on it. Maggie squeezed her eyes shut tight and didn't open them until she heard the gravel under the car tires once more. Capricorn likes this bridge a lot, said Dustfinger quietly. A single well-armed man is enough to make it impassable, but luckily he doesn't post a guard every night. Dustfinger. Maggie turned hesitantly to look at him as Eleanor's car labored up the last hill. What are you going to say when they ask us how we found the village? I mean, it's not going to be a good idea for Capricorn to know that you showed us the way, is it? No, you're right, muttered Dustfinger. Among Maggie's eyes, although we are bringing him the book. He picked up Gwen, who was clambering around the back seat, held him so that he couldn't snap, and then lured him into the backpack with a piece of bread. The marten had been restless ever since darkness fell. He wanted to go hunting. They had reached the top of the hill. The world almost then had disappeared from view, swallowed up by the night. But not far away, a few pale rectangles glow in the dark lidded windows. There it is, said Dustfinger. Capricorn's village, or the Devil's village, if you prefer. He laughed softly. Eleanor turned to him crossly. For heaven's sake, will you stop that? She snapped at him. You really seem to like these stories. Who knows? Perhaps you're all your own inventions, and this Capricorn is just a rather eccentric book collector. Dustfinger made no reply, but only looked out of the window with a strange smile that Maggie sometimes wanted to wipe off his face. Yet again, it seemed to be saying, "How stupid you two are!" Eleanor had switched off the engine, not Eugene. The silence surrounding them was so absolute that Maggie hardly dared to breathe. She looked down at the lighted windows. Usually she thought bright light windows were an invading sight in the dark, but these seemed far more menacing than the darkness all around. Does does this village have any normal inhabitants? Asked Eleanor. Harmless old grannies, children, people who don't have anything to do with Capricorn? No, nobody lives here but Capricorn and his men, whispered Dustfinger. And the women who cook and clean are so on for them, and so on. Oh, wonderful! Eleanor snorted with distaste. I like the sound of this Capricorn less and less. Okay, let's get this over and done with. I want to go home to my books. Real electric lights and a nice cup of coffee. Really? I thought you were longing for a little adventure. If Gwen could speak, thought Maggie, he'd do it in a Dustfinger's voice. I prefer adventures in the sunlight, replied Eleanor hurriedly. Heavens, how I hate this darkness. Still, we sit around here until dawn. My books will be mildew before Mortimer can do anything about them. Maggie, go around to the back of the car and get that bag. You know the one. Maggie nodded and was just about to open the passenger door when a glaring light blinded her. Someone whose face couldn't make out. She couldn't make out was standing beside the driver's door, shining a flashlight in the car. He kept it commandingly against the pane. Eleanor jumped in such alarm she hit her knee on the steering wheel. But she quickly pulled herself together. Cursing, she rubbed her leg, and opened the window. What's the idea? She snapped at the stranger. Do you have to frighten us to death? A person could easily get run over, skulling around in the dark like that. By way of answer to the stranger pushes the barrel of the shotgun through the open window. This is private property, he said. Maggie thought she recognized the raspy cat's tongue voice from Eleanor's library. And a person can very easily get shot trespassing on private property at night. I can explain. Dustfinger leaned out over Eleanor's shoulder. Well, who have we here? If it isn't Dustfinger. The man withdrew the barrel of his gun. Do you have to turn up in the middle of the night? Eleanor turned and cast Dustfinger a glance that was more than suspicious. I had no idea you were on such friendly terms with these people, she commanded. You call them devils. But Dustfinger was already out of the car, and Maggie didn't like the familiar way the two men were talking. She remembered exactly what Dustfinger had said to her about Capricorn's man. How could he talk to one of them like this? However hard Maggie tried, Maggie strained her ears. She couldn't make out what the pair was saying. She got only one thing. Dustfinger called the stranger bastard. I don't like this, whispered Eleanor. Look at the pair of them. They're talking to each other as if our matchstick-eating friend can come and go as he please. Lakes. He probably knows that they won't hurt him because we're bringing them the book, Maggie whispered back, never taking eyes off the two men. The stranger had a couple of dogs with him, German shepherds. They were sniffing Dustfinger's hands and snuzzling him in the ribs, wagging their tails. See that? Hissed Eleanor. Even those dogs treat him like an old friend, suppose. But before she could say any more, Bastion opened the driver's door. Get out, both of you, he ordered. Reluctantly, Eleanor swung her legs out of the car. Maggie got out too, and stood beside her. Her heart was thudding. She had never seen a man with a gun before. Well, on TV she had, but not in real life. Look, I don't like your tone, Eleanor informed Basta. We've had a strenuous drive, and we only came to this god-forsaken spot to bring your boss, or whatever you call him, something he's been wanting for a long time. So let's have a little more civility. Basta cast her such a scornful glance that Eleanor drew in a sharp breath, and Maggie involuntarily squeezed her hand. Well, did you pick her up? Inquired Basta, turning back to Dustfinger, who was standing there looking as unmoved as if none of this had anything at all to do with him. She owns the house. You know the one I mean. Dustfinger had lowered his voice, and Maggie heard them all the same. I didn't want to bring her here, but she insisted. I can imagine that. Basta scrutinized Eleanor once again, then turned to Maggie. So this is the silver-tongued's little daughter. Doesn't look much like him. Where's my father? Asked Maggie. How is he? These were the first words she had managed to utter. Her voice was hoarse, and so she hadn't used it for a long time. Okay. Oh, he's fine, replied Basta, glancing at Dustfinger. Although he's saying so little at the moment that Leaden Tug would be more like it. Maggie put her lip. We've come for him, she said. Now her voice was high and thin, although she was trying as hard as she could to sound grown up. We have the book, but we won't give it to Capricorn unless he lets my father go. Basta turned to Dustfinger again. Something about her does remind me of her father after all. See her lips tighten, and that look? Oh yes, anyone could see they're related. His voice sounded as if he were joking, but there was nothing funny about his face when he looked at Maggie again. It was thin, sharply angular, with close-set eyes. He narrowed them slightly as if he could see better than that. Basta was not a tall man, and his shoulders were almost as narrow as a boy's. But Maggie held her breath when he took a step toward her. She was afraid of him. She had never been so afraid of anyone before, and if it wasn't because of the shotgun in his hand, he had an aura of fury about him, or of something keen and biting. Maggie, get the bag out of the trunk, asked Basta. As Basta was about to grab Maggie, Eleanor pushed herself between them. There's nothing dangerous in it, she said crossly. Just what we came here to hand over. By way of answer, Basta pulled the dogs aside, yanking on their leashes so harshly that they yelped out loud. Maggie, listen to me, whispered Eleanor, as they left the car and followed Basta down a steep pathway leading to the lit windows. Don't hand over that book until they let us see your father, understand? Maggie nodded, clenching the plastic bag firmly to her chest. How stupid did Eleanor think she was? On the other hand, how was she going to hang on to the book if Basta decided to take it away from her? She preferred not to follow this line of thinking through to its conclusion. It was hot, sultry night. The sky above the Black Hills was sparkling with stars, The sky above the Black Hills was sprinkled with stars. The path down which Basta was leading through them was stony and so dark that Maggie could hardly see her own feet. But whenever she stumbled, there was a hand to catch her. The hand belonged either to Eleanor, walking beside her, or to Dustfinger, who was following as silently as he could wear her shadow. Gwen was still in his backpack, and Dustfinger, Basta's dogs, kept raising their noses and sniffing, as if they had picked up the sharp scent of the marten. Slowly they came closer to the lighted windows. Maggie saw old houses of grey, raw hewn stone with the pale church tower rising above the rooftops. Many of the houses looked empty as they passed, growing down alleys so narrow that Maggie felt they could close in on her. Some of the houses had no roofs, others were little more than a couple of walls partly fallen in. It was dark. It was in Capricorn's village. Only a few lamps were on the street, hanging from a masonry arch above the alleyways. At least they reached a small square. The church with the tower they had seen from a distance stood only one side of the square, and not far away, divided from it by a narrow hallway, there was a large two-story house, which did not look at all derelict. The square was better lit than the rest of the village, with 4 lanterns casting menacing shadows on the paving stones. Basta led them straight to the big house. When more light shone between 3 windows on the upper floor, was Momen there? Maggie listened to herself as if she could find the answer there, but all her heart would tell her was a tale of fear and grief. I'm assuming this is Capricorn. Who knows? That's it for chapter 13. Stay tuned for chapter 14. No, 13. Chapter 14 will be next video. And thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and hit the notifications bell to be notified when I upload a new video. And comment and like. And tell me what you think of this Vasa character in the comments below. Do you like him? Do you not like him? Let me know. And don't forget to dare to dream. Bye, guys.